Welcome back to the 6th Gear Garage. Today, I'll show how to cut out all the rusty metal from this rear quarter panel and replace it with new sheet metal. So these are the reproduction panels for Wolf Steel, and they're pretty close to the original, but they're not exactly the same. So my goal in this repair is to use as much of the original sheet metal as possible and cut out from this what I need. If you look down from above, you can tell that this body line right here is a little bit more of a hard edge on the Wolf Steel panels than it is on the original 4Runner body. In the last episode, when I gutted the interior, we got a good look at the rust from the inside, and it's always worse than it looks from the outside. The first step is going to be pulling off this plastic rocker guard and seeing what kind of ugly we've got behind there. Let's see here, which one of these is going to be the least likely to break this plastic clip. Let's go with the metal one. Ooh, there it goes. By the way, these panels are different between the trucks and the 4Runners. So if you find a set used, because as of now they're still discontinued, make sure you get the right one for your vehicle, because they're not easy to come by. There we go. Yeah, that was actually screwed in from the inside. And I'm also going to take off this plastic trim panel here, as well as the mud flat from the inside of the fender, just to get those out of the way so I don't damage either of those in this whole process. So I've just been soaking this bolt, tightening it as far as it'll go, then loosening it as far as it can go, over and over and over. And I was doing the same with this one, it ended up snapping off. I was so spoiled working on the Southern 1980 for the past, year and a half. Now that that's done for now, it's back to rust. I think this one's gonna come out. Oh, there's something else. The bolt on the other end was seized, but I did get this one loose. Don't you break. Time to let it soak. I think we're good. There's like an hour process to get that off. And so far, I've broken 3 out of 5 bolts. This is why you don't buy a Toyota from Ohio. So there was 2 back here. The lower one already snapped off. The upper one's feeling pretty good though. Whew. So let's take a close look at how these panels actually fit. And the fitment is not great. You can see, of course, the obvious body lines don't carry over. Yeah, even down here, and this just kind of is cut and folds up right here. And then over on this side, I've got about a few inches before this curve here starts to flare out. So that's why I'd rather cut off all of this fat here, all on the edge, because none of this exactly lines up with the original body, and just use this part right here. And then when you get down here toward the front, it's like a whole nother mess. There's this cut here, and I don't know what you're supposed to do. I guess maybe push these both in and sort of overlap them and weld them together. Hopefully I won't need to bother with any of that. I started by drawing a rough guide 3 inches from the wheel opening to give me a visual of the bad area I needed to cut out. Good metal, bad metal. Hear the difference? Solid. Weak. If possible, I'd rather have my lines sort of come down and hug this edge a little bit more than have to cut all this out and deal with that weird gap on the replacement panel. So this all seems pretty solid in here. Got a spot of rust right there that could be coming through from the backside. Oh yeah, just went through. So we're weak right here. Let's tap around that and see if there's any more rust that's just not coming through yet. So I'll probably come down right about in here. Use this mark here as a guide for my cut line. And if I need to later, I can always cut in farther. But like I said earlier, I want to keep as much of the original sheet metal as possible. The outer layer of body here has actually rotted away completely. And this here was spray painted white by the previous owner. I don't know, in an attempt to sort of mask the rust a little bit. This is all the inner fender, which they do not make replacement panels for. And then down here again, we have the outer edge again of the rear quarter panel. So this used to be connected to this, and now it's all gotta come out. And hopefully there's enough left of this where I don't have to fabricate a new inner fender, but we'll find out. And at one time, there were spot welds holding this together. And as you can see, most of those are rusty and some no longer even exist.
Next, I drew a guideline on the replacement panel about 3 inches from the edge to cut off all the excess that I wasn't going to use. I started cutting with an air cutoff tool, and that was slow. So I got out the Weber Cut 50P plasma cutter to speed things up. And that was much faster. I'll put a link in the description to this plasma cutter. It's a great bang for the buck when it comes to any kind of metal fabricating. And then I cleaned up the edge with the grinder. I used a hammer and chisel to bust up any remaining spot welds that held the outer panel to the inner fender, and pulled off any pieces with vice grips.
So all over the floor here, you see what was once the outer edge of the exterior of the body that wraps around this inner fender here. And I ripped off everything I could. You can still see pretty much all the spot welds are still attached, so I will have to grind those down. I chiseled away all the loose stuff with the hammer and chisel, and I grabbed the bigger chunks with the vice grips and twisted them off. Now, one important note, on the backside of the lip here, there was 2 plastic clips that held the backside of this rock guard in place. And here is one right here, and the other one is over here. So if you're gonna make this exactly how it was from the factory, be sure to pull these out of this piece and save them instead of tossing them in the trash. When it's all said and done, I'll have to drill 2 round holes in the back of this and file those square, and that way I can push those clips back in to use the screws that hold on the rock guard. And I'm doing all this right now so that I can align the new panel closer to the body to where it should be without having all the old rusty junk in the way. So the next thing I'm gonna do is grind down what's left of all these spot welds. So here's how that inside edge looks now. Obviously it's still quite rusty with surface rust, but I got all the chunks of the old spot welds removed, so it's nice and smooth. And before I set my new repair panel on here, I'm going to erase my old line, and this way I'll be able to draw a new line that exactly matches the repair panel. And Sharpie marker comes right off with a little bit of brake clean. So I've got it all clamped in place and it looks okay at first. On the back side here, I've got a big gap down here I can fit my finger into. And then down at the bottom, it's not even close. What I'll probably do is have to put a line right here and bend it in a 90 and then have the excess come down flush with this pinch weld here where the spot welds are. But I really can't get into the fine-tuned details on the ends here until I get this fitting in place a lot better. So I'm at the point now where I have my piece trimmed to the point that I like. So now it's time to draw my official cut line on the original fender and get to work cutting out all the rust so that I can get this lined up and start getting it to be more flush. So notice I stayed under my line a little bit because I can always trim more off. That's a lot easier than adding new metal back in. Look at all that rust that just fell out. Wow. And this is why I always remove the inside trim panels, because I was shooting all kinds of sparks inside there. And the last thing I want is to melt or damage any of those 40-year-old plastics. And the good news is that this inner fender still looks pretty solid. I do have some ugliness going on back in here. All right, pretty solid. This is going a little bit better than I expected, believe it or not. So back here is actually a lot better than I expected. All I had was some surface rust and I got some flaking paint, but this is all solid, believe it or not. This is pretty good all through here until I get up to here. Yeah, look at that big old hole on the inside of the body here. I can poke right through. There it goes. I guess I won't be needing that, because that all looks really rusty. And here's what fell out of it. All right, maybe one of you 4Runner owners know, what are these things? This one just fell out of here. And when I was gutting the inside, I found two more of those things. They were sitting right in here on top of this seam here where the inner fender meets the body. If you know what these metal spacers are from, please let me know down in the comments.
I hit the inner fender with the grinder to knock off the surface rust and get a better look at its overall condition.
So after cleaning all this up, I'm dealing with pretty good metal. I got a couple suspicious looking spots. Right here, you can see it's kind of recessed. I couldn't even get to it with the grinder. I'm thinking it's gonna go right through. That was pretty much paper thin right there. And this kind of work is easy because that's all hidden when the job is done. One more right there. So 2 small repairs on the inner fender. And despite having surface rust, this is all very solid down here in this corner where it sort of curves and wraps down around. So I'm going to use that original metal instead of trying to work something out with this hard edge and this folded over corner here. So I'm going to cut this off and use that.
This is my favorite game. It's called Trim a Little, then Test Fit. And then I just keep playing this same game over and over until it fits right. I don't bother recording the whole game because it would make my bodywork videos long and boring. And sometimes that's how it is. So although it may appear this way, there is nothing fast or quick about this process. Now I'm fine-tuning the joint where the new panel will meet the original one. I don't want to remove too much material here, so I remove small increments, then stop for a test fit. And repeat.
So when I'm using a cutoff wheel to cut a hole through the body, I'm inadvertently shooting sparks through the inside of the body, so I put a welding blanket here to catch all those sparks. If that blanket isn't there, those hot sparks can fly across here and hit plastic or even glass, and if they're shooting up, they can definitely damage this vinyl headliner. So you'll definitely want to pick one of these up if you're doing any kind of work like this. I'll put a link to one down in the description. I should have done this before I started. I cut up the driver's side, but I'm over on the passenger side, and I'm going to make a quick template just to document all these different curves and angles going on.
Now I'm tracing the black lines onto the opposite side of the tape, since I'll be overlaying it onto the driver's side.
I did this just to see how my body line was doing here and to see where this edge was lining up compared to the other side. And it's a little bit too far back this way. It should be a little bit closer. My rudimentary template here shows me that. And also down here, it's just not gonna be exact. You probably wouldn't notice because in the end, it's gonna have this cover over it, which is gonna hide all that, which is sort of like my saving grace here.
And back to trimming the panel a little bit at a time to get it to fit just right. Now I need to trim a little bit off of the very front edge. Hey, if you're looking for some used OEM Toyota parts, check the description for a link to my store where I'm unloading all the Toyota parts I've hoarded for the last 10 plus years. If you don't see a certain part, just ask.
So I've got this pretty close. Before I bother dialing this in, I'm gonna have an edge right here where I need to weld to the original body. And as you can see, the original body is not doing great. I do have a replacement rocker panel here. I'm not gonna need all this. Let's see here. That sounds pretty good. Can you hear the difference? Sounds pretty hollow. Sounds pretty solid. I'll probably repair up to right about here. And this is designed to replace the entire sill here at the bottom of the door. So I'm not going to need most of this because you can see this body line stops right about here once it gets past the edge of the door opening.
Next, I searched for any other weak areas in the sheet metal, and fortunately, everything above that body line turned out to be solid.
I'm looking for a good place to cut this and have the new panel meet the original panel, and unfortunately, this bottom contour here is all bad. That'd be a great place to blend these two together because it's gonna be kind of out of sight, but I need to wrap this up around, and I'll probably try and do it maybe on this little strip right here. None of these went through, but let's go inside and take a look real quick and see how solid we are from here on up. So I can see the holes that I just made. And look at this whole like streak right here. How does that even happen? So here's a really helpful tool. I'll put a link to one of these in the description. This is gonna help me visualize the contour of this piece and how it matches up to this piece. Pretty good. This curve is pretty close. It's just a tiny bit more rounded than this curve, but I don't think it's gonna be too noticeable. Let's get one last measurement of this, and then I'll trace this onto cardboard, and that'll give me an idea of how exactly this panel will need to line back up when I re-weld this one back in.
Next, I got to work cutting out the rotted rocker panel. If a quarter panel is rusting through, there's a good chance the rocker panel isn't far behind. So I'm including this repair in this tutorial as well.
Now there were spot welds that held this panel to the bottom of the pinch weld here, but they're so rusty, I might just be able to snap them off.
It wasn't quite that rusty around the spot welds, so I did need to break some of them apart with the hammer and chisel.
So here I can see I did cut enough out. I've got good, clean, thick metal on this edge, and on this side, it's good all the way up to here, but down here, it's getting pretty thin, and I've got a hole right here. This is gonna be a little bit tough to recreate just because of this sort of compound angle here. I've got a curve going this way and a curve going out and down under here, but I'll figure that out. Look up in here. How about that? Ohio. Let's get a better look at that. Right there. So this is the bottom of the pinch weld seam here that goes the length of the body. So I might as well just cut all that out and go up here a little bit. And I'm going to have to replace a lot of this as well. As I'm breaking off the extra metal around some of these rusty spot welds, I'm seeing that the whole panel is kind of more flexible than I think it should be. So before I spend any more time trying to salvage what's left on this panel, I think maybe I should go get a better look at the backside. Which means it's finally time to vacuum up the floor because I don't want to lay in this pile of tetanus. Okay, so that area that was flexing, right here, very rotted. The rest of the pinch seam at the bottom here looks good. I do have a lot of overall surface rust, but my plan is to pull the body off the frame and come under here and just blast all this off with the laser, and that should get me back down to clean metal. That's not gonna be until much later on though, when I get the body removed. And then here's the big ugly section right here. This is all going to need to be refabricated. Not the end of the world, but definitely a little bit more than I bargained for. So the next step is gonna be getting in here and taking out all this rot.
I tried to knock the rotted parts out with the spike hammer, but had trouble getting a good swing in that tight area.
Well, the main issue here is that I just can't get into that tiny little area with the tools I've got. So time to bring in the reinforcements. Huge shout out to Mikey from the Shop Spot for letting me borrow this. I'll put a link to his channel down in the description, so check it out. This is a needle scaler, and these little rods at the end, they move in and out, and they pretty much knock the rust off of anything. And I can get in this tight crevice here with it, so it should be perfect. Let's try it out.
I tested out some other suspicious looking areas with the needle scaler, such as the other side of the rotted out area inside of the wheel well, and although a little rusty, turned out to be solid. Now for this area. Not so solid. The needle scaler was a huge help. I'll put a link to one of these in the description. So the needle scaler broke up a lot of the rust and chunks and found some new weak spots, but I still need to get up in here and sort of clean this mess up before I can create any kind of new patch to weld in there. And we'll see if I can get in there with this angle die grinder to clean up some of those rough edges. And trimmed off some more of the rotted metal with the cutoff wheel. And some more with the angle die grinder. So I've cut out all the worst of the worst rust so far, but in order to get in this area and refabricate everything back in here, I'm unfortunately gonna have to cut out part of this good sheet metal. I didn't want to do it, but now I have access to this. What's that noise? Oh shit, is that smoke? Oh shit. Fire. Mikey? Oh, fire! Fire in your sleeve! Fire in your sleeve! Wait a minute.
Dude? Oh, what's going on?
How long have you been in here?
I mean, ever since I got evicted from the blue truck.
Good noise.
What's up, dude?
How long have you been in there?
I noticed that this wasn't exactly occupied, so I figured, pretty nice rig, honestly.
Hey, while I got you here, you mind helping me take this top off? It's a two-man job, and I don't want to catch anything important in here on fire.
All right, cool, let's do it. Oh, hang on a second. Oh, yeah. Okay. Well, hey, I'm over at Shoals right now. I'm gonna have to give you a call back. I'm almost out of minutes, so you gotta. Yeah. Okay. All right. Bye. Sorry, that was the old ball and chain. I did not want to get too rough with it.
Dude, we're lifting the whole truck.
Yeah.
We'll lift my back.
Live with your back in a twisting, jerking motion, okay?
I'm gonna lift my back. Like a turtle.
Ready when you are.
Oh,
there you go.
It is. All right.
Turtle power.
Yeah, I'll take it. All right.
Remember, folks, the spine is the strongest muscle in the human body. We find that. Oh, there we go.
Seems pretty balanced.
Yep, not bad.
Just
Wow.
All right.
Tight quarters.
Now with that out of the way, I can get back to work on this. What I'm doing here is just squaring up all of these edges and making them straight. This will make things a lot easier when I create new patch pieces out of sheet metal to replace all these rotted out areas. All my edges are straight now, for the most part. I want to clean up all this surface rust in here, since I'll be welding to this. So let me introduce you to my guest, the FLC 200 by Fortune Laser. It's a 200 watt pulsed laser cleaning machine. I got this about a year ago. You guys know I still edit video on a 2013 iMac, I saved up $9 grand to buy a Mac Pro and like a new Pro display. Decided to buy this instead, and it's been a game changer for all the rusty stuff I worked on. So much more time saved than if I had a faster computer. Now, let's go vaporize some rust. So sandblasting and chemicals are now things of the past. I'll put a link in the description to a video I made all about this machine and what it can do. And if you're looking at that somewhat rusty frame, wondering why I'm not cleaning it, well, I just got a 2,000 watt continuous wave machine from Fortune Laser, and it will clean a frame in a fraction of the time that I could with this 200 watt laser. I'll be doing that once the weather warms up a bit. Next, I got some thin cardboard and started tracing the pieces that I needed to make to reconstruct the rotted areas that I'd cut out. The back of this bottom pinch weld sort of bends out a little bit, so I'm making a template from the passenger side and using it on the driver's side to see exactly where my new pieces need to line up, since that area was completely rotted away on the driver's side. I grabbed some old leftover pieces of sheet metal from my scrap pile and used the cardboard pieces as a template to trace onto the sheet metal, and cleaned the paint off of the edges where I'll be welding. I heated this piece up to help form it into this compound angle. And ground down some of those welds to make sure they penetrated. And upon closer inspection, I definitely had an area that I needed to re-weld. After welding, I cleaned the surface once more with the laser cleaner and sprayed the bare metal with some self-etching primer. Now it was time to weld in the area of sheet metal I had cut out to repair the inside of the body. And I'm just tacking everything in for now, until I have all of the pieces I need. Right about now, I realized that these replacement rocker panels did not match the contour of the original body. So I was able to bend this and sort of get a sharper angle here where this curve was, and that's pretty good over here. But down here, I got a whole nother problem because remember, this curves out. So I've got a big gap right here, and this pushes the whole side out like that. Not even close. So what I need to do now is put a cut right here on this seam where this 90 is, and then I can bend this out a little bit so that I can match this contour right here. Something kind of like that. Okay, here we are, an hour and a half from when I started messing with this piece. I've finally got it. This was just a tough set of curves and angles to work with, and I ended up having to go back and actually bend this curve on the top here a little bit tighter, and then that sort of got that to line up better with this curve here. Next thing I'm gonna do before I fine tune this and get it all ready and check it one more time is I'm gonna pull this off. I'm gonna laser this paint off real quick, get some clean bare metal, and then that way I'll hopefully have to put this on one last time before I can tack all these different bits and pieces together and get it ready to go on for final assembly. I burned off a little bit of the primer with the laser, so I sprayed another coat. With the rocker panel taken care of, it was now time to get the wheel arch positioned. A quick test fit of the rock guard, and things were looking pretty good. I did have a small area of rot to cut out here.
All right, let me show you where I'm at here. This piece just isn't really fitting that great. You can see if I push it in here, it bows out a lot up here. If I push it in over here, it ends up bowing out over there. But I'm just focusing down here right now. And this is getting pretty close. You know, if I push this in, it's decent. But the good news is that all of this is gonna be covered by this rock guard here. And get a hole lined up. I'm good on this side. I'm good down here. And I'm pretty much good down there. So what I'm gonna do is pull this back off one more time. Clean all my edges, remove any paint, get them ready to weld, or at least tack on for now. All the way down here, and I'll get this tacked in, and I'll just have this little tiny space to make a patch for.
Hey, I designed some merchandise for all the Toyota fans out there. I'm talking t-shirts, hoodies, phone cases, stickers, posters, you name it. Here's a new one I just made. It's the Marty McFly tribute. I'll put a link to all these things down in the description, and thank you for supporting the channel.
All right, to keep this video short, I've been doing a little bit of work off camera. I've got it pretty well fitted, except for one issue we'll look at in a second. But I'll show you what I did is I cleaned the inside of this back in here too, because soon I won't have access to that. And I went ahead and sprayed it with a self-etching primer, and I did the same thing all the way down in here. And it's over 50 degrees today, so I've got one chance to go ahead and install this panel. And I'm choosing to use 3M's panel bond instead of welding or spot welding as I did from the factory, because as we know, these being spot welded together causes water to seep in between the two panels, and those spot welds are where the rust begins. And I'll also be spraying the inside of these panels with fluid film when this is all done and painted. Never spray that before painting. But using panel bond instead of welding or spot welding should hopefully prevent the chance of rust happening again. So this isn't cheap. This was like 60 bucks. I hope it's enough for both sides. And I had to get this special caulk gun to apply this. I'll put a link to these in the description. I figure I'd rather spend 100 bucks now than ever have to redo this job in my lifetime. You might notice that I switched to using these butt clamps instead of all the vice grips that I had clamped around here earlier. And if you remember, when I had all those vice grips clamped on here, it was actually like buckling out right here at the top. So I switched to these butt clamps. I got these on Amazon. I'll put a link in the description. You can see they have a rod that goes through in the backside, and that holds these two pieces of metal together. And you can see now, I mean, they're nice and flush. So that problem is taken care of. But now without these vice grips holding this together, there's an obvious gap. Now it's tight on the top across here. But if I look behind here, let's check out the back. You can see there's a little gap there. But up front here, huge gap. I mean, that's like, I can fit a finger in there. And, you know, I'm pushing this in as hard as I can right now. It's a little bit better, but we're still at least, we're probably close to a ½ gap. These panels aren't wide enough from end to end. The arch of these is just a little bit too small. And that's unfortunate because I can either choose to have it clamped tight here and have it buckle out up here like it was, or have it look nice up here in the body and have a gap down there. So because this is what you're gonna see, I'm gonna keep it like this. What I would normally do in this situation is weld this first, since this is in a good spot, and then go back and clamp this in down here. But I have to do this first with the panel bond, because once that goes on and dries, it's stuck that way. Now, the one thing working in my favor here in Ohio is that it's 50 degrees Fahrenheit today, and the colder the temperature, the longer this stuff takes to set and begin to cure and harden. So you can see I've got 6 hours before this actually starts to set. So I'm gonna pull this back off one final time, clean, apply the panel bond, and get it set in place. And then I'll go back and try and clamp this a little bit and see if that doesn't cause this to buckle at all, just so I can close that gap. And do the same back here for this much smaller gap. I have everything all cleaned up and I'm ready to apply the panel bond now. Now normally I think I would apply it on this very inside edge here, but as we found out, that doesn't fit. So I think the best edge of contact between the two panels is actually gonna be this one here. The panel bond is a structural bond. What I'll probably do later is go back and fill this gap in with just some seam sealer to fill that void, and that's not structural. So first time using this nozzle is a one-time use. You can see it pushes the panel bond through. This is a 2-part epoxy and mixes it as it comes out the tip here. So they include 2 of these, so I'll save one for when I do the passenger side. So this was the $40 caulk gun I had to buy to apply this. Okay, I'm seeing it mixed together in there. I want to make sure that both parts are mixing equally. So after I squeeze some through and make sure that both parts are mixing equally, I need to do a nice bead all along my mounting edge. This squeegee is way too wide, so I cut this piece off of another one. Should be just the right width, and I want to smooth this out. So this stuff smells exactly like JB Weld. Now I need to do the exact same thing on this surface. It even has like the same consistency as JB Weld. I don't know if anybody knows if JB Weld would work for this. Let me know in the comments. Now back over to the repair panel. One more step with this is to put a nice bead all along this where I already smoothed it out, and that's just going to help to fill any void, because you know these 2 areas where I'm mounting together aren't perfect. So I'm going to go a little thick on my bead here because I know these 2 areas don't match up exactly. And the next most important thing after this is to make sure I don't scrape up this bead as I'm installing it, which is going to be pretty easy to do on this edge since they're just facing each other. If I was doing it on this outer lip here, there would be a good chance of me scraping it up and actually removing this bead as I'm installing it. Like I said, I'm going extra thick on the bead just because I did have some pits on the inner fender on the vehicle. And as we know, these panels aren't exact perfect match. And I have all my butt clamps ready right here in the tire. And just get that alignment mark there in the center good. And we'll throw on the first butt clamp. Okay, let's keep going with the butt clamps. Just real loose for now until I get this thing positioned in its final location. I'll just do one every 12 inches or so. So far so good. It is poking out a little bit down here, so I will need to clamp that on the bottom to pull that in, get it flush. First I want to make sure that this is good because this area is going to be hidden by that plastic rocker cover. Now I'm going to start to fine tune this and even out this gap from front to back. So I'm going to be tapping this up a little bit this way. And as I'm getting this dialed in, I'm going to tighten up these butt clamps. Now, as I tighten this up and clamp it down here, you can see my panel starting to bow out a little bit right there. So I'm going to throw a clamp in here first and then go down there. So I put some clamps down here to help draw these sides closer together and this side closer together. And now I'm starting to get what I had before right here, where it's just starting to pop out up here now. Same with this. You know, I push one in and the other goes out. I mean, these panels, they just don't fit great. I'm the least worried about this because most of this is going to be covered up by this rocker guard. So that's the last problem. I think what I'm gonna do right now is, with all the tension that's happening here with this one to pop out, is I'm worried about this surface coming apart and not staying bonded together. So I'm gonna put some clamps around like this in a few spots to help that stay close together. All right, after much tapping and clamping and bending and convincing, I finally have this panel in a place that I like. It's just close enough on the edges to where there's not a huge gap. I have a pretty small gap. I'm talking like the 16th, maybe an 1/8 max along the edge between the two panels, which is gonna be good for welding. This is, we'll see what happens with this side over here. Like I said, it's really wanting to pop out a lot, but I don't want to tighten this down and then have that tension cause this to separate or pop out back here. So I'm gonna leave this the way it is for now, and we'll deal with this last because it's all gonna be hidden by the cover anyways. And then very last, I'll figure this mess out down here. We're back. I've let this sit about 24 hours now.
Far from fully cured, but still cured enough to get back to work on tacking in the rest of this sheet metal. Actually, let's go see something here. Yeah, plenty cured. So as I'm gonna tack these in here, I wanna make sure that this metal is flush. Here you can see it's not flush in the middle. The bottom is out a little farther, but if I tack weld right around each side of the butt clamp here, that is gonna be more flush. And there's some areas that I have the opposite problem where I'm gonna have to go around to the back side, back here, and actually push the metal out a little bit to get it to be flush. So in addition to that, the most important thing is spreading out the tacks and letting the metal not get too hot. You can't just lay down a bead here or this will actually warp and I'll have a big crease in the middle. So spread out the tacks and take my time and let it stay cool. I did this tack here and then noticed that the repair panel wasn't sitting flush with the body. So I need to grind this tack down, line up the sheet metal, and try again. So far, I'm really happy with how this is going, but let's take a break. And I'm gonna have to figure out what to do up front here. Because as I'm bringing this down, mind you, this is all hidden behind this plastic rocker guard. Things are getting a little crazy down here. I had to bring this way up to get it in to meet with this inner fender in here when I panel bonded those two together. So I really had to bend that inward, and that sort of changed all the fitment to this. Because you can't see that, as long as it's not really poking anything out, it should be all hidden. All right, I like that. Mostly lined up. This is perfect on here, so I'm happy with it. So since none of this actually matters visually, what I'll do is just keep on going down, tacking this together and bring them together. Now in this big gap here, what I'm gonna have to do is heat this and bend it inward to meet this. And then once I get down here, I'll bend this in to meet this at a 90, kind of like it did over here. And then I'll trim off this excess fat down here that I don't need anymore and just make one final patch piece to fill in this. I'm at the point now where I'm pretty much lined up going across like this. So I'm gonna make my patch panel, and then it's gonna be a really weird shape, and then be able to weld all this together
and then cut off my excess down here. Now I've got a piece of the thin cardboard from a cereal box, and I'm actually gonna go behind inside the panel. Let's see if I can get this behind here. All right, that works. I'll take off these clamps and get it all lined up. So it's coming along, and as I put more and more tacks, these holes get smaller and smaller and harder to see. So I took that LED light that I had across the floor and I put it behind the panel. So now I'm gonna have a backlight shining light through all of my holes. And now I can see I have a lot more holes than I saw a second ago. Back to work. Let's take a break and do some grinding. You can see I've got most of the pinholes filled in, but like I have some tiny ones in here, but there's beads on each side, so it's just hard to get in there because of the irregular surface. So I'm gonna grind this down first and get it nice and smooth, and I'll make it a lot easier to tack in the rest of the small pinholes. Remember how a few times I really stressed being careful about the heat so I don't warp the panels? Well, notice my grind marks here. As I was trying to grind these wells down, I kept hitting here and here with the wheel because this area is sunken in and these areas are now more raised. And if you look at the straight edge, you can see I've got a little bit of a decent gap there. Here's perfect. Here, tiny gap. Same here. But right here is pretty bad. Like I said, it's so easy to warp this sheet metal. This is probably like 20 gauge steel, and it's just really prone to warp, especially in these long straight areas. The solution is when it comes time to do the body work and paint this truck, I'll just have to put a skim coat of Bondo across there and bring that back to flush. So do as I say, not as I do.
By now, I only had a few more pinholes to weld. So here's how all that turned out. Again, I'm pretty happy with all this, except for I got a little bit of warpage right there in that area, but otherwise it went pretty well. Now, I'm not quite done yet. I still have to attach this part down here. And while I use panel bond on this edge here, this is more of a structural connection here, so I'm gonna go ahead and plug weld this. And for that, I'm gonna use a spot weld drill bit. I have one of these left over from when I replaced the floors on my blue 1980 truck. And a spot weld drill bit has a little point in the middle and then it's flat, and that's better than a traditional drill bit, which is angled, because that's gonna make it a lot easier to drill through this outer piece of sheet metal without drilling through the one that's behind it. Oof, really caught at the end there. One. I forgot to record the welding, but here's the grinding. Here's how the whole repair is looking now that all the metalwork is complete. Now that the driver's side metalwork is complete, there are some additional steps that I'll be taking in a future video. First is body filler. Of course, I'm going to go back and fill in the spot where the panel's warped and created a small void. And then seam sealer, where these two panels meet on the inside lip and there was a small gap. I'll fill that with seam sealer to prevent water from getting in there. And last is fluid film. I'm going to spray these panels from the inside and the underside, and this stuff will creep over time and help prevent rust from forming in any voids. But that's not going to be till later on, because I'm not going to use these products until all the metalwork is done, so stay tuned. If you enjoyed this video and found it helpful, do me a huge favor and hit that thumbs up. That really helps the channel grow. And if you're into these old Toyota trucks like I am, consider subscribing, because I've got a small fleet of these vehicles and there'll be plenty more videos to come. Thanks for watching.